So we'll call the meeting to order and we'll start with pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll move to roll call.
Okay, Mayor Menning,
Here.
Brenneman,
Here.
Keel,
Here.
O'Hara,
Here.
Randall, Jones,
Here.
and Monahan is absent with notice.
All right. Do we have any motions to approve or any additions to the agenda?
I'd make a motion to approve the agenda. Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, do we have motions for minutes from January 5th, 2021?
Motion to approve.
Second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? All right, next we'll go to bills submitted for payment.
Motion to approve. Second.
Discussion.
I ask this every time, Mitch, what's the 11,000 or something for Mickelson Road?
We're still in our third round of comments now with FEMA. Is it that, do we have that much filled out on that?
I think it was a big number. I noticed it when I went through. I didn't write it down, sorry. See if I can find it. Is it 11,000 or something?
There's 11,000 there, but it's a bunch of projects.
I said that isn't just
Yeah, in
the-
total, we did bill several projects here for the end of the year invoices. Mickelson Road, I'm looking, is this a breakdown? I've seen that'd be
yeah.
$700 for.
But I seen one, there was one other I thought was referenced Mickelson Road, that's why.
Oh, here it is, $708.
Yeah, I just didn't think, we shouldn't have that much on that.
Now I can't find it.
It's down further from the 11.
I'm just curious whenever I
But that
see
is the, that it has all to do with FEMA remapping of that floodway through there. Like I said, we're in our third round of comments with it, which is a little, usually go through 2 rounds of comments, and we're going through the third round with them right now. And every time we submit our new maps to them, they have basically 3 months to review. So
Oh yeah, I see it. Oh, I seen the 11,000 and then I scrolled down and seen Mickelson Road and I probably put the two together, sorry.
Yeah, 11,000 is all the force account and general stuff, and the
Yeah.
700 is Mickelson Road.
All right, any other discussion? All right, we'll vote. Randall?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Brennan?
Yeah.
Keel?
Yes.
And O'Hara?
Yes.
All right. Next item up is any public comments, any public input on any non-agenda items. Think so? All right. I got 704, so we're gonna move down to the second reading of ordinance 698. So it's not the first one on there, it's second reading is ordinance 698 for the zoning amendment for off-street parking. No changes from first
Okay, there's
reading.
been no changes since the first reading. This was brought to you, from the planning and zoning. They discussed the driveway widths, and like I said, no changes. It's if you have a sidewalk on the property side of the sidewalk, can be wider than 36 feet, but from the sidewalk to the street side, it has to stay at that 36 foot. And if there's no sidewalk, it's the property line, which is what it is now.
Motion to approve second reading of ordinance 698.
Second.
Discussion. All right, hearing none. O'Hara?
Yes.
Keel?
Yes.
Brennan,
Yeah.
Jones?
Yes.
And Randall.
Yes.
All right, we got 7:05, so we'll go to 7:05 public hearing. We've got the zoning of the northwest piece south of RY except H3. Basically, the property along Highway 38 is Zachariah's property.
Yeah, this is, Jeff Zachariah's property, this one, Highway 38, we recently annexed that strip in there. Part of our annexation agreement with Mr. Zacharias is that once annexed, we would zone it heavy industrial so they can continue the same use they are doing now. So this would rezone it from the county zoning of A to the heavy industrial. Like I said, they can continue operating as is. If they want to change any uses, they do have to abide by our heavy industrial regulations. So if it's something that requires a conditional use, they got to come to the board for conditional use, just like anybody else would. They do have to follow our regulations.
Didn't all of those negotiations go by the wayside?
We have a signed agreement with him.
It took a while, but I don't know if you were here when, well, I don't want to speak out of session, I guess, on that, but all agreements ended up being signed.
The only one we don't have an agreement with is Anderson's, and we just brought them along with the annexation. Yep.
How does that, heavy industrial, not their, well, are they annexed or not? They are, right?
They are.
They're technically in the city limits, right?
Yep, we annexed it with that whole strip.
How does
Yep.
that work with open burns?
Same thing, they gotta follow, they basically have to screen it, technically. They're in city
So like
limits.
burning a big pile out there, is that against city policy or ordinance?
Technically, yep.
Hmm.
Should be in barrels or some kind of container. I mean, yeah, once you're part of the city, you gotta follow our regulations.
I know it's pretty broad what they can and can't do out there, and I seen that and I thought,
But the open
does
burning
that
has
fall under
nothing,
it or not?
yeah. Open burning has nothing to do with the zoning, it's just one of our regulations under our municipal ordinance.
Be similar like red beef, bring them into the city, all your regulations.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah.
All right, do we have any motions?
Make motion approved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moved. Motion approved.
I'll second, just so we can, if there's any further discussion.
All right, discussion.
We don't have an agreement in this packet, do we?
No, I have a copy of it here, so. Should have it with this stuff. Page 3, it says what the city would do.
Thank you.
Three or four, it says what the city agrees to and then what he agrees to.
So whatever they would want to do out there with the heavy industrial, as I'm reading this, would need to comply and come before
Well,
city regulations?
it has to comply with city regulations, all zoning does. So, if it's a permitted use under heavy industrial and they follow all the conditions, they can do it. If it's a conditional use under heavy industrial, then they have to go before the planning and zoning board to review their plan and get approval with anything. That's what conditional use needs, so. Not everything is a conditional use, there are some permitted uses, so as long as they follow our standards that are set out in our zoning regulations, they can do it. But if it's something that requires a conditional use, then they do have to come to the planning and zoning board. And we have permitted and conditional uses in every zoning district, residential, community, commercial, light industrial, heavy industrial, so.
So if it falls under heavy industrial, they can do whatever.
If it falls under heavy industrial, if it's a permitted use under heavy industrial, they can do it as long as they follow our regulations. And the zoning book has what our regulations are. If it's a conditional use under heavy industrial, then they gotta come before the P&Z board.
Sure.
Any other discussion, questions?
Has there been anybody across the street over there in Hartford Heights ever, have we ever had a complaint?
No, I've never heard of any complaint of
And if they
what
would
they've
have
done.
complained to the county, we'd hear that eventually, I would assume.
If they would have complained to the county probably would have had to address what they're doing on that property, and they never have, so
Okay.
I'm assuming.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, if nothing else, we'll vote. Brennan?
Yeah.
Keel?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
O'Hara?
Yes.
And Randall.
Yes.
All right, we'll move to policy 2021-1, engineering for capital projects. This is based on a discussion we had coming into the wastewater treatment facility, a little bit about, we've talked a little bit with Mitch and John about this as well. Trying to nail down a city policy for basically looking outside of our appointed engineer for projects over a certain size. And when we see a certain size, we say, okay, let's do an RFQ in these cases versus just going forward like we are. So I would say, Tracy, you maybe got background on it too, but it's, we may like it exactly the way it is. We may want to offer for revisions. It's kind of just first look at it.
Yep, this is just a draft of it. I try to keep it fairly simple. Basically, it outlines, what is a capital project. It kind of follows the same wording that we have already with Stockwell's in their force account of what a capital project is. So I want to stay consistent with that. But basically, this policy states that over a certain dollar amount, the city can go out for RFQs and look at other engineering firms. Under that amount, whoever our appointed engineer is would do those. It also gives leeway that if for some reason the sitting council at that time does not want to do an RFQ, they can, by a majority rule, bypass this policy, because this is just a policy. The dollar amount I put in there was $9 million. I originally had 7.5. Stockwell's wanted 10. I said, well, let's throw 9 out there and see what the council says. So that is up for you to discuss of what you think that dollar amount should be. So, yeah. So like I said, this is a draft. You guys to review and have discussion about.
So what was Mickelson? Do you remember? 6 something?
Nicholson was about 5.
I say, right.
Yeah, and one of the discussions I think that's relevant to this that we had with John and Mitch too, as we were leading up to this, is when an engineering firm like them, when they come on board to be the city engineer, they also give up all engineering projects within the city. You know, any opportunity to work on other developments and other things like that, they push that business away and say, no, we're the city's engineers, so there's no conflict of interest on those kind of things. I don't know if I'm wording that exactly correct, but it's close to that. So when you appoint an engineer to be your city engineer, that is one thing to take in mind. They don't get to partake in the other projects that are coming up in town at that point. So they've got some risk to that as well. So want to keep that in consideration when we're thinking about these kind of things. The other thing is, wherever the number lands on this, like you mentioned, Mickelson a $5.5 million job. Could have been up to $6 million. I think it came in under. We have the wastewater treatment facility, which is going to be over $9 million. It may be a while before we reach that cap, wherever that cap is set, depending on, you look at like Western Avenue or some of those kind of things, not necessarily by the interstate exchange, but if we had to do all of Western or something along those lines. So that's just a little bit of food for your discussion, I guess, to think about that.
Say, Jeremy.
Yeah.
The other thing is too, we did have another engineer, one of the engineering firms come and talk to Teresa and myself. If the dollar amount's too low, they're not even gonna do an RFQ on it. They told us what they had invested for the last one. They said they probably wouldn't even go after another one in Hartford. So the dollar amount, I think, is,
Well, that's
it
interesting.
needs to be high enough. Otherwise, if it's too low, they're not gonna come after it anyway, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, RFQs do cost engineering firms, to the time and the money put into that. So if you do one for every
I
project,
was shocked at the number.
and they never get them, you quit getting, them to participate in them. So that's something to keep in mind.
Sure.
If I walked away from every deal, I wouldn't be in business. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree, but
That's just them crying that they didn't get the deal, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, we chase everything that's thrown at us, so.
I mean, seriously.
It's called overhead.
I'm
It's
just,
all the cost of doing business in our
Yeah,
world.
but they did bring that up.
Yeah,
so.
we
Long counsel to bring that issue to.
Right. Yeah, we quote everything.
And-
Direction.
Yeah. So I spent 6 hours in a car today for an hour meeting. So I don't know, I guess my feelings on this are irrelevant to me to have something like this. One, how often do we have a project of this size? And two, we still can decide if it's a $4 million or $10 million project if we want to do an RFQ. So, unless I'm missing something.
I mean, their force account, the way it's kind of worded, does kind of reference that they do the city's capital projects, so.
Yeah, if you remember this, I think this policy came from discussion of language we had in our force account agreement that tied us into all of your capital projects by that appointment. And there was, going through the RFP, that put you guys in conflict with that language that we had. So, I think that it was the city's thought to go to a policy that we can reference in our force account so we don't put ourselves in that conflict, I guess, with you guys.
Yeah, and they did make that change in their force account to reference however this policy lands, to reference this policy.
But is it not did I hear you say it's our discretion, we want an RFQ on any project?
Well, not the way their force account is worded right now.
Not according to.
With this policy, can we get an RFQ on any, or it's gotta be over 9 million?
That's why we're looking at adopting this policy to
Oh.
put that dollar amount, whatever it is, to, these are the projects we're
So we
gonna
change
do
it
our.
to a couple bucks or something.
Yeah.
That would fix that, maybe.
Any numbers or language that come to mind or thoughts on that?
Could this be corrected with a change in the force account contract?
Yeah, so the force account contract that's in your packet that we're looking at later on in the agenda reference this policy that they would abide, Sockowalls would abide by this policy, whatever it ends up being to be.
But what you're asking is
Oh.
if the force account contract had different language, would we even need this policy?
So the force account references this policy, and it's gonna be a $10 million project, or, normally the other way, $5 million project. Do we have to use the engineer, or do we still get to go out for RFQ?
When they originally submitted the force account contract, I did suggest wording to change it that they would do any capital projects that the city assigns to them, kind of change that. But then we had the discussion with Mitch, and I understand where they're coming from as well, that, you know, they have been at the risk that, you know, we're gonna do RFQs on, you know, every project comes along, and they, like Jeremy said, give up work from other developers or anything that is happening in the city, just so there's no, you know, conflict there. So this gives them a little bit of security that they're gonna get X amount of capital projects from us.
If you're gonna appoint a city engineer, then I think you should give them some framework to say, yeah, we meant that when we appointed you, that we're gonna do it within this scope. Otherwise, what's the point?
Nobody would apply to be appointed if that's what followed it to the end. Because there's nothing in it for them.
It's
If
uncertain.
any time we want to, we can go off for RFQ, right?
Yeah, that's,
Basically, you guys are looking for a guarantee. I hate to use that word.
I mean, we're looking for a relationship, you know, and understanding, I
We
guess.
say that all the time too.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, you're looking for a guarantee.
It is an understanding that we're looking for. When we're appointed, we want to know, we do want reassurance that we will be doing your projects. You know, because the force account work really is small as far as our business goes compared to working on your projects. And that's why we've written our force account agreements in a way that we're in one breath, we're saying that we're disengaging from all this work that's occurring. Because then I went through and added it up. And over the last 10 years, there's probably been $10 million worth of improvements done in the subdivisions alone. And that doesn't include just even your site plans that are out there, like the Ace Hardwares and those places. So there's quite a bit of work that we don't chase. And so we're asking, I guess, for that in return, I guess. That we have an understanding that we'll be doing those projects. So when we give that work up, we know that there's that relationship, I guess.
Right.
Just to give you an idea, the force account, we usually budget around 50,000 each year, so that's not a ton of dollars for just reviewing our plats and stuff. It's the projects, like I said, they usually make them a little more money.
Is this standard with most cities?
I don't know. I mean, I know our company, the towns that we work in, we've always not worked for developers, or I know that there are towns that the engineers do both work. I really don't know what other companies, how they're structuring themselves that way. That's just how we've structured ours anytime we act as a city engineer.
I think the amount should be 10 million, it's easy, and then every project we see coming forward is probably gonna be just under 10 million.
Wow. I was gonna say 5.
But we don't wanna waste their time.
Right.
And, you know, others got, we have that relationship.
All right,
I guess my problem with it is, how do we tell somebody that we know we're getting the right people doing the right job for the right dollar? And what was your bill on Mickelson? $500,000?
Yeah, probably.
You know, and so if somebody ever comes up to me and says, my relative works for XYZ engineers, how come they didn't get a chance at it? And how do we know we got the best price for the city of Hartford?
Right.
How do we know they're the right firm? And that's what kind of drove the wastewater plant, in my
Yeah.
opinion, was, is this the right people to be doing business with on the biggest project we've ever done?
Right. And
So we had to do our due diligence there.
Yep, completely understand that.
And whether it's 5 million or 12 million or 15 million, I'm a little nervous about being locked in with somebody that we've got no control over the charges,
Yeah.
if that's the case.
Let me back up a little bit. So that our force account agreement would reference this policy. That force account agreement on its own has a termination clause right there in it. You can terminate that and unemploy us at really any given time. So if there was that, concern, 'cause I really think for a community, it is a good practice to use, whether it's us or someone else sitting in the seat, to utilize your appointed city engineer, because they will understand all the other projects that you have going on and whatnot too. So if you have that ability to terminate that contract with us too, aren't you?
We also have a city staff, and all of a sudden their proposal comes in and it seems really out of whack. We can table it, ask the city staff, hey, can you do some research for us? Can you find some similar projects? Because everything's public. What are other engineering firms charging for similar sized projects? Just to make everybody honest. I think if we dwell on this too long, it might point to a concern that we don't trust Stockwell. And if that's the case, we probably should appoint another city engineer.
I'm trying to see both sides fairly, I really am.
Yeah.
And regardless of which way, if we pass this, I think we're passing a policy that doesn't need to be in place, regardless. It seems somewhat redundant and wants us in. It's like a little
Without
both
this.
that I don't like.
Without this, we could request it for any project we.
We could.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we still can if we pass this.
Sure. So it's more bureaucracy.
There you go. Whatever.
Do you have any motions?
Motion to table policy 2021-1.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Can we vote? Brennan?
Yep.
Randall?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
O'Hara?
Yes.
And Keith?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'd say we probably should have it on the agenda next meeting though, right? Is that what that means when we table, is it one meeting or indefinite or?
That's
If you
indefinite.
just table it, it kills it unless you say table it until such
Oh,
and such a
sorry.
time.
Or somebody requests it back on. the
Yeah,
table.
okay.
You guys requested that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Chief Warren, got our new fire chief here. Come on up.
I like
Well-
your report already.
What's that?
I said, I like your report already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Matt Horn. I was elected fire chief a couple weeks ago, so
Congratulations.
thanks. Looking forward to that. I'm sure you've all seen the year-end report that I just kind of put together real quick. Some of our accomplishments, I probably don't need to read through them all. But it was a really busy year for us. 407 calls, 41% increased over last year, which is, last year was our busiest year ever, so 2020 was now our busiest year ever. Quite a few calls in town, 29% increase over last year. Most of those are medical calls, pretty standard. 627 volunteer hours spent in the city of Hartford alone, so, and that doesn't include meetings, trainings, or anything like that. For the month of December, we had 43 calls total, 14 in Hartford. And for training this month, we are doing CPR, automatic external defibrillators, and our Lucas device. So,
Of the 627 hours, how many volunteers does that affect?
currently we have 37 on the roster. So, it's quite a bit per person.
Yes, it is.
How do you feel your membership is? Is that a good number? Would you like more, or are you?
Always can use more people.
Yeah.
We've got, we've got members that are more active than others, so getting good active numbers really helps spread the load out. Any other questions?
Are you going to continue the same capital improvement plan, or I know there was like
Yep,
a rollout of
Yep.
equipment and all of that
the
stuff?
committee will meet on that again here probably before too long, at the beginning of the year to review it, and then once again, about 3/4 of the way through the year, so.
Sure. Sounds good.
That's really
Yeah.
good.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Okay, move over to stockholder report.
Well, we got 2 contracts on the agenda. I'd like to start with the wastewater contract. I have a handout here just to reflect our schedule for the project. Run through this real quick. We met with city staff and the mayor to scope out the project. So I just want to run through that with all of you quick. And Jim's here tonight too to help answer any questions. So John would have been here, but being yesterday was a holiday, all the council meetings that we had from Monday night got shifted to the night, so he's in North Sioux tonight. So he wanted to apologize that he couldn't be here tonight. But anyway, if we could run through this schedule quick and we'll kind of reiterate what we talked about at that scoping meeting. But this is a schedule starting with approval of this contract. I wanted to just show that this really is a contract to get us to 30% design documents. We call them design development documents. We're really trying to lay out a plan here so we can set ourselves up for bid season in 23, or I guess December 22, January 23 in that time frame. Okay. We feel we need about 9 months to design this project fully. And so we're proposing to get to a 30% level now by October 1st. Okay, and then we're essentially going to take a break while you guys are securing funding and going through that process with the DNR, because they have a deadline of October 1st to submit for their state water plan. Okay, and then we'll turn around and apply for a funding project with them. And you won't find out whether you got that funding until March. Okay, and by the time you close on that loan, it'll be April before we can start up again. So that only gives us 6 months to get the rest of the design done in that time. And so that's why we propose bringing 30% into this contract. That wasn't in our previous contract that you guys saw some time ago, back in May, I think was the first time we presented that. But I wanted you to kind of have that understanding of how we're developing this. So any questions on that? And I did want to run through scope. I'll try not to get too deep into it, but just wanted to point out some highlights. The agreement is set up to work in phases to meet this schedule that we just discussed. As you flip through it, you see it starts with just some acknowledgements, basic scope of services. Phase 1 being our project initiation and management. We've just got some items there that are pretty routine for managing a project such as this. You get into the survey. It's a standard topographic survey. That includes the trunk line. All this work includes the trunk system that starts up by Railroad Avenue in the park there and goes all the way to the site, and then also the outfall. So it's the the pipe that will go towards Skunk Creek, so that'll follow Highway 38, so it includes that in the site. So this whole contract includes all that work. One thing we added after our scoping meeting, Mayor, was conducting a field survey at the existing wastewater plant, so that we can get a measurement of the biosolids that are in those ponds, so we can help you guys estimate how much work there might be there to reclaim that site. Okay, so we thought we added that after our discussions here to this contract, so we can do we call it a sludge judge method to go out there and measure those biosolids. Okay, and that'll just help us estimate that project. Not that you might do something with that right away, but at this stage it might be good for you guys to understand and help you value that site up there a little bit. Phase 3 being schematic design. This is where we're going to establish some design criteria. We're designing to a 2045 population, but again, we're also designing for expandability. If you move down the line, I'm on 3.3. Again, this scope is structured, so we're going to be working with, we're bringing on our sub-consultants of Dr. Chris Schmidt and Jeremy Lynn onto our team to help with evaluating options. We're going to go through that matrix that we had in our proposal of all those system systems and help you guys narrow it down to 3 that you want to fully evaluate. And then we'll do a full evaluation on those 3 treatment options. 3.6, we have a rate study contract with you folks already. That's in place. It's been sitting dormant for about a year, waiting for this project to come along. We're going to pick that project up again and start evaluating your rates and your structure so that you guys can be ready to present those things to the public. So that's why 3.6 is mentioned there about bringing the rate study and coordinating with that contract. All of this is going to be an effort to bring to you a schematic plan that's going to lay out those 3 options. It's going to estimate the cost of all 3 options, go through a cost analysis, life cycle cost analysis, so you can look at the operation and maintenance costs too and make sure we're selecting the most cost-effective option and easily maintained. So that's kind of the schematic plan. We'll come to a presentation to council to present that to you folks to help you select one to move forward with design. Okay, and then that brings us to phase 4, which is a 30% design effort to bring that selected option to the 30% design level. All in an effort to really refine our cost estimates so that when we go request funding, we have as good of understanding as we can of what this project's going to cost. Okay. During that 30% design, we'll be meeting with private utility companies, getting an understanding what it's going to take to bring power to the site, what it's going to take to bring gas to the site, and those types of things. But again, we'll have a design development document that will get submitted. We'll have a cost opinion that will get submitted as part of that work to review with your staff and you. Phase 5 then is entering that funding assistance, just helping, CCOG will draft a lot of that funding application, but we help them with submitting a facilities plan and cost estimates and different things that go along with that funding request. And then attending the board's meeting, which will be held in March, to award funding. The additional services, I just wanted to point out, this contract does not have any, we did some exploratory services already with geotech. There will be more that we'll have to do as we enter 60% and final design. Once we have our structures laid out, we're going to want to probably take a few right at those structures so we're sure we got a good beat on those. But with this contract, we don't need that right now to get to the 30% design level. So we're not including any exploratory services. It does bring on a little bit of service from our architect and our electrician, just to get some preliminary thoughts from them. No public meetings at this time. And we always put construction documents as addition. This is not a construction document that we're developing. This is a design development document, all in an effort to reach a final construction document that the contractor can build off You see compensation of $424,900. Is there any questions I can help answer?
I think as we went through this timeline, it set us up for the best chance for the most amount of funding to be finished with the design work by the end of September, so that we're ready for that October window. And it's set up for the best bid timing, basically at the end of the year in 2022. So, kind of looking through some of those pieces of it, a lot of it is based on timing those windows just right, so that so we're sitting out there in the best chance for funding and for bidding. So.
The other important part to note with the funding is, I came up with Teresa because I wanted to make sure, this is a big chunk to bite off. You don't have your funding in place, we need to make sure that you guys have funding available to pay for our expenses, I guess, at this point. Once you have a funding package in place, these are recoverable underneath that loan that you'll get. So I think that's kind of an important element of there. But we didn't want to put you in a position where obviously you couldn't afford this at the beginning stages. But it sounds like there's enough money in the funds to.
So our sewer reserves, we have a little over 600,000. So we do have money in reserves, and we can always transfer a couple $100,000, or if you want to come half from the general fund to cover this 424,000. I mean, we do have money in reserves to cover these upfront engineering services. And like Mitch says, once we get our funding package, we can include these expenses in it to get reimbursed. But in reserves, we do have the funds available to cover it up front.
Thank you.
So this might be kind of a crazy question. So if that's 30%, what do you think the other 70% is going to cost us?
Well, so we've estimated the project to be about 14 million in construction dollars, we feel.
Okay.
This is about 3% of the construction dollar value. And usually, we're in that total, or 8 to 8.5% of the construction value
When all said and done.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is probably about that third of that overall design contract.
Okay.
And again, that won't include construction administration of the project as it's being built too.
That'll be on top of that.
Yeah.
That's the 125%. So this is 30. They add like you do, Mark. This is how you do that.
I have as many zeros as one.
Well, I think we all know this is a big project. And back to our discussion on another topic, I mean, this is something this has gotta be right.
Yep. Any other discussion or motions?
I gotta ask. The aggressive scheduling provided in the proposal is not what we're looking at here.
No, we had that conversation with the staff too. Because we were prepared to go for the second round of funding. After speaking with the mayor and Teresa, you guys had thought about that, it sounds like, and didn't have an interest in pursuing that schedule. And it had to do with, I don't know if you want to elaborate.
Yeah. So there's the first round of funding, which is in January, and then there's the second round of funding. Well, any money the state has for grants, money you don't have to pay back, usually that all goes out in the first round of funding. So the previous schedule would have put us ahead of time, but we would have hit that second round of funding. And so if the state doesn't have any extra money left over for grants, that kind of blows that shot of getting grants, and we'd probably have to loan everything. So I think that January, in my opinion, is the better bidding time to go after, because you have a chance for grants, for them to give you some of that. And and also the loan funding, so, I mean,
Yeah, we had a pretty good discussion on that when we met with them to go over this, because yes, it could be more aggressive. We can get that thing built fast if we were under a time pressure to do that. If we've got a shot for more grant money by going out this timeline and better bids by bidding it out in December through January, we felt that was more important than doing it quickly. So Stockwell did come to us with both and basically said, hey, how do you wanna go with this? Any other discussion, questions? All right, do we have any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve the wastewater treatment facility contract with Stockwell Engineering as presented.
I'll second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
So you made a comment, Mitch, about construction services. What's that piece cost?
So construction service, it depends on the level, it kind of depends sometimes on the contractor we get.
Yep.
Like right now, Harrisburg is doing full-time inspection. They did have us draw back a little bit from that just because they were confident in the contractor that they had out there. But I would say usually we budget another 8% for construction or observation in the field.
Of the total
Yeah.
project?
Yep, so total engineering and construction is 16% typically of the construction dollars.
Of the construction
Yeah,
dollars.
and it's anywhere between 16 and 20, you'll see on projects like this. That's where we kind of average around 16.
Other questions?
This schedule, you're hoping to have construction done by when?
So this would be spring of '24. No, I'm sorry, fall of '24. It'd start in the spring of '23 and have it up and running fall of '24.
Well, I just gotta go on record saying that's disappointing to me because that was part of the evaluation process to me, that your guys' timeline was accelerated compared to others. And so, it's all said.
And I'll go on record to say, I would have said the feeling from the council was not that that was the main selling point when we decided on Stockwell. I think the main selling point was to not redo work that we would have. That is
There was many
already done.
factors, I'll agree, but, I'm just gonna leave it alone.
Well, it's certainly a valid point. Kick the can, funding down, I think it's kicked down the road. I'm glad you brought it up. It did elevate you in that category significantly.
Yeah, and again, I have reached out to the state. Second round is, they usually save money for the second round. That's why we were presenting that option, because there is money held for projects that come in the second round. They don't always fund them like they do the first round. You might not get as many grants as you would in the first round. And, this project will be a good candidate probably for some grants. So, again, they still save money to award in the second round. But I think there is some truth in what Teresa's saying, is that your chances of getting grants and more grants is better in the first round.
Motion to table this till our February 2nd meeting.
We already have a motion.
Oh, I do.
Yep.
Motion to approve.
Yep.
Yeah, I made a motion so we could at least so we could discuss, so.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll vote. O'Hara? Yes. Keel?
No.
Brown?
No.
Jones?
Yes.
And Randall?
Yes.
All right. So our motion does not.
And
Is that right?
We have to have 4, right?
Yeah, they
That's
fell,
four.
so. To do like, I guess give them direction, and you wanna see a more aggressive time scale? I mean, you can move funding up another 6 months, but then that gives you on the second round, and I just thought if we got a chance to get grants and save the taxpayer that money without having to loan it and pay back, I mean, it just would be the best. Plus, it always seems like January is a good, December, January, good bid time versus fall, when a lot of contractors are full, so, but. I mean, like Mitch pointed out, they presented, they could do it sooner and they could, but is that the direction we wanted to go?
Say, Jeremy,
Yes.
when would they have to have this in by to qualify for the fund?
Well, we gotta get on the state water plan on October 1st. We gotta get this preliminary stuff in October 1st to get on the state water plan.
So that's what we're shooting at here is, right, October 1st?
Right, this
But if we
contract
wanna
is
do-
shooting for. yeah.
If we want to do the fall, go ahead, get more aggressive, when would it have to be submitted by?
I don't think you can get much more
Oh,
aggressive on the front side, it's the
Okay.
back side.
Oh, just
right?
in the maximum?
State water plan, they'll take quarterly.
Quarterly, I would say. quarterly.
So you could get on, I mean, our accelerated schedule was hit April 1st with the state water plan. I believe you know more.
Yeah, I believe that's close, and then, the type and amount of funding that we would be, looking for, we're not gonna have the detail that we would have if we extended this or took had a little more time for that look. But we could certainly get on the plan, we can keep revising cost estimates and things as we progress, right up to the time we request the funds.
I mean, we can do that, you guys, I mean.
Yeah, if these guys want to give up grant money, that's totally fine. I think we need to consider,
It's all hypothetical, so.
oh, yeah,
This
so is
is
anything.
proposed, it's proposed.
Yep.
I just don't want to see us get too aggressive
There's no reason to.
and
What the hell
end
is
up
the
missing
reason?
something. That's I want to make sure whatever facility we decide to go with, it's the right facility for Hartford in the future.
Absolutely.
I'm afraid if we get too aggressive, I mean, we've still got plenty of time with the state. I don't know, I'm just a little leery about this big of a project. And it's something new to me. I mean, started out with wastewater facility, that's 20 years ago. I want to make sure that I feel comfortable with me or whoever's going to run it, to have the right facility in place. That's my biggest fear about getting to, I mean, if we think we can get it done, I'm for it. Sooner the better, we get it up and running, but I hate to see us get
Talk
down
about a
on track.
90% probability that we're gonna emulate, a model,
What's
a
that?
Harrisburg model. I mean, that
Oh,
seemed to be,
yeah.
that was the,
Yeah.
that was the crowning
that's-
jewel.
We haven't really had a lot of discussion with you guys, but I mean, it seems to be you guys were interested in that Aeromod system. But guys, we stand ready to be able to, if you want to do this thing in December of, December's gonna be tough, but it'd be bid season next year, we could still meet that. I mean, that's what we are prepared to do. Just whatever you guys want to do there.
I guess, Teresa, you're used to working with grants and loans, but we're talking more grants here. You kind of know the pattern of funding and when they make things more available versus less available. I just want to point that out, that you've got some experience there. I think that's one of your better talents, is getting funding, or at least getting grants and those kinds of things.
And it's just, yeah, January, beginning of the year is when they usually disperse most of their grant money out. I mean, they always got money they save for the second round, but usually that's loan money. And we can always loan the whole thing, but if we get like I said, a chance to get grants, those don't have to be paid back. And it just, like I said, saves money for the taxpayers there. If we don't have to pay.
I realize sometimes I miss things, but was that in our discussions before on when the grants were gonna be, and did we know that this was gonna be an option for proposed timeline?
This
Did we
isn't their
discuss
first,
this during the evaluations of the RFQ of when?
this wasn't the first timeline they proposed. They proposed, like during their presentation, a more aggressive one, but that one had the like a year ahead of time. And it was the same kind of January bid.
And here's some food for thought. I mean, we can accelerate this. We have to do the 30% design. We can sure accelerate that and get it done earlier for you guys, so you can see a little bit further down the road and decide whether you want to pull the trigger on 60% final documents, in just earlier in the schedule, and still leave us enough time to do that 60%, 95%. Because I do think, we can sure do that with this contract too. Just get this 30% accelerated. We just, after talking with the mayor and staff, we just gave ourselves more time. But I'm trying to say, we can sure accelerate this 30%, so we're still in position that you can still pull the trigger on going right into 60 and having accelerated 60 and 100% documents too. Okay, because ultimately, if we go to the accelerated rate, I have to have these 30% done much earlier than we're showing here, and we can still do that. Does that make sense?
And this is the kickoff to the largest project we've ever done. It hit, and we just have an opportunity to start digesting it, and because we don't approve it, the wheels have not fallen off the bus.
I have your proposal back what you presented us. I think maybe this is it says March 2021, apply for funding for design and construction of the project.
Yeah. Yep. We've always been on that track.
Yeah.
But that proposal was back in May.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
so when we were talking, that's kind of what's driving this deal. We had seen, that was the timeline that we.
This thing hits the box at 5 o'clock on Friday. All right? Monday's a holiday. I mean, we didn't have time to talk to anybody.
Right.
And all of a sudden, no, we gotta shut it off the pot.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Council's been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah, and we had a whole different agenda, and the city staff and the mayor come up with a whole new schedule. Now you're upset because we're not just running to it with open arms.
I'll say my comment. I think, at this point, there's a pattern of that right now with the council based on the previous discussion and this discussion. And, I think if there's going to be this much into every discussion when it comes to engineering or thing, then we need to figure out what's going on. Because I don't think there's anything you like.
I think it's fair for me to question what, on the initial looks, is a bait and switch proposal.
And I think you were given a fair description of why that's better for the
Yeah, but I can
taxpayers in the
still
city.
be, aggravated at it because other people presented their funding ways, other people had different proposals. There's many factors that went into this, and an accelerated schedule to me was important.
Okay.
Now, instead of completion in '23, you're telling me September of '24. That's a year. And everybody keeps telling us how important it is to get this project done as soon as we can because we keep being out of compliance. So, I get that right to ask the question.
You did,
Okay,
you did.
so don't make it come across that we have issues with every single thing. We're not talking a month. It's a year from what was proposed.
And this doesn't go on the shelf and never come off again. There's nothing that says we can't talk about it on the 2nd of February. Give us some time to process this.
And I believe our approval of the RFQ was to negotiate and discuss the proposal and what it would cost, etc. So, I am not opposed to the funding. I don't have a problem with that. That's why I asked, did I miss it earlier in the conversation where we should do the funding as proposed now versus what was on here? And I don't feel like we discussed that. So, that's where I'm at. And if this is what we have to do and that's what's best, not much we can do, but I just don't like how it was initially presented and what we're looking at now. I can sit here and be quiet and not say nothing. That's not me.
Our motion that we made when we said we were gonna move forward was to discuss and look at the proposal, right? Didn't say we had to approve it January 19th, did it?
Well, the negotiated contract.
Right.
So would you, just in order to move on, so would you like Stockwell's to basically draft up maybe a couple timeline scenarios and the pros and cons of each maybe, or the differences anyway of one versus the other? Is that something that you'd like to look at, or I guess I'm just looking at to give them direction?
Did we get a estimated total cost from Stockwell for the project?
Well, we won't, because we still gotta decide.
Gotta decide which one we're using.
Yes, and what kind of plant we're gonna do, yeah.
And if we decide to go with what you're talking about, Teresa, some options, then I would like to see also pros and cons from your guys' standpoint, so that because certainly on a project like this, as well as anything else for that matter when we're using taxpayers' money. We need to make sure we do it right, not fast. And so if we can do it as expediently as possible, but yet still do it right and have all the benefits of making sure all our Ts are crossed and Is are dotted, that's ultimately, I think, the goal of all of us.
All right, well, any direction from those opposed? Okay, we're gonna move on. Yep. Force contract.
Horse account contract. This, we're gonna have to revise this because it is referencing that policy that got tabled. So I just need to know from you guys if there's a number you guys want us to just include for these projects. I mean, you tell me, Because right now our past agreements have always said all projects, and I know there's an appetite to put a number in there, so I'm just basically looking for your feedback.
And that feedback came from this council, so again, when it's something that's feedback from the council that says, hey, let's put a limit on there, and then a limit comes forward and nobody likes any of it, think about where you want to be on that, so you've got some direction moving on that too. All right, anything else for engineering?
Nope, unless anybody has questions for me.
All right, thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
Yep, appreciate it. I'll move to Craig's report.
Just a few things different report. Roads, we did all a bunch of snow today. We've got that intersections up at 6th, 7th, and 8th on the western that always drift in so bad, and they're pretty hit pretty good here with this last winds and that stuff. So we got all that hauled out of there, working on getting hauled out. Crossing light, we did have a crossing light that got hit down here on 2nd and Kelly. One of our guys, part-timers, hit it with a skid steer that night. So get looking up, trying to find parts for that. We'll get that back up as soon as we can, working. The rest of them are all working at this time. Then as far as training wise, Terry, Alan, and myself have completed pesticide classes, so we are done with those. That's all I got in my report. That's different, I guess. You guys have anything for me?
I see Alan's gonna start taking some classes. How's that start? Like class 1?
So the first one I'm gonna get him looking at doing is be a 2.5-day online thing with webinar.
Okay.
It's kind of like where all of us has started.
Yeah.
You'll take the 2.5 days. That class will pretty much get you through your class 1 in that field. As long as you pay attention, usually everybody passes that first one. I'm on the board now, I see about only 40% pass anymore. I think the test got tougher, I don't know. So, but it will work with them. I told him, I said after we got done with pesticide, I'd start working with them as far as the basics of water, because that's what I'm gonna have to take first is basic water distribution. So they'll take do the test or the schooling, and then the test will be in Brookings. So when he gets done at 11 o'clock on Thursday in February, he'll drive to Brookings to take the exam. And then if he passes or doesn't pass that, there's another exam coming up in April in Sioux Falls. The exams are scattered throughout the state, and there's only like about 2 of them a year in Sioux Falls, 1 or 2 in Brookings, maybe 1 in Mitchell. So they're, unless you go spend a night somewhere, which now with everything being on a webinar, it's about impossible to do that. So you just got to pick classes that are close to home, so you can make that quick trip to do the exam. So I'll be working with him. Like I said, the first one we're going to work on is water collection, class 1. And then if he passes that one there, which I feel pretty comfortable he can do that one without any problems. And then we'll go to wastewater collection, the next one. The biggest thing with the classes is the math part of it, is most of it. Most of it is just kind of common parts, like parts of a pump, parts of a meter, things like that, so that'll be pretty, should be, I feel pretty comfortable with him taking out and passing it, so. And at the same time, in April, I'm gonna attempt to do my class 3, so we'll see how that goes. I'm gonna be trying to do some study in the meantime, but, so I'll be working on that one too, so trying to get that, since that's in Sioux Falls here, it's, I don't have to sit, there's no classes before then and now, so it's just a matter of trying to do some studying myself on it and then go attempt it, so.
All right.
So, yeah.
Good, thank you, Craig. All right, Karen's report?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. Just wanted to reminder and point out that petitions can start to be circulated on January 29th through February 26th to be back in the office. I have the petitions available in my office, or you can get them off the Secretary of State's website as well.
Okay, great. Perfect, thank you. All right, Teresa.
Not much change from my report, just update on the CEDD applicants. We were supposed to have 2 interviews today. We only had 1 show up, so we had 1 interview today. We're scheduled to have 2 tomorrow, so after that, hopefully we can narrow down the candidates and present somebody to come before the city council. So we're moving ahead with that. And we are taking applications for the part-time office assistant. We have about 6 in right now. We're going to continue at least for a couple more weeks and then kind of review them and see if we got viable ones to interview there as well. The Golden West franchise agreement we have with Golden, it is up this year. I sent a copy of our current one we have to Tom last week just to kind of have him review it to see if he thinks we could start off that or we should do a new agreement if there's any issues or concerns. He thought it looked like a pretty sound agreement. Did suggest a couple verbiage changes, but before we send it on to Golden West, I guess I just wanted input from the council. Do you have any concerns with the current agreement with Golden West? It is a non-exclusive. It's a franchise agreement, so we do get revenue off it. I guess, I don't know if you guys had any input or thoughts on it, or if you just want to look at, I mean, obviously, you know, once our attorney looks at it, their attorney looks at it, it'll come for you guys to review before anything's finalized, but, and we have till April, but they've been good at looking at the current agreement and going from there.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, we'll start there, and like I said, we'll send that on to Golden West and have them look at it. I'm just going to give an update on the P&Z. Tony Randall's the chairman again this year, and the vice chairman is Brett Miles for there. And I will be out on vacation the first week in February, just for your reference. So, Karen Craig will hold down the fort.
Try.
Give us a checkbook.
I don't want to know nothing.
Karen's saying no.
Karen will keep him in line.
All right, looks good. Any other questions for Teresa? All right, thank you. All right, we got new business. We got county plat, tract 1 of Meelan's edition.
So this is a plat brought to the city, went through P&Z last week. Is not in city limits, but it is in our growth area. So from the East Interstate Exchange, right north of there, on McMoleen's land, they're platting off the acreage that is right north of that exchange. It's a little over, I think, an acre. Yeah, 1.09 acres. They're platting off that farmstead there. And so they have signed the pre-annexation agreement, which is required with their new plat. So they're all paperwork and the plat's all in order. Just needs city approval so they can move on to the county.
Motion to approve plat request for tract 1 of the Moline addition.
Second.
All right, discussion.
Yes.
Brendan?
Yep.
Keel?
Yes.
And O'Hara.
Yes.
We got lots 1 through 8, block 1, Hartford City proper. Discussion of transfer.
So these are the city-owned lots, the lots we purchased from the elevator, you know, here on First and Main, on the corner there. It's blocks 1 through 8 that the city now owns. There's been discussion within the HADF of transferring those. They're currently owned by the city, transferring those to the HADF for marketing and using for, you know, to bring in a business.
Yeah, any other background on it?
Yeah, there's been some interest in those lots from some developers. What's that?
There's a couple stories to read.
Yes, some of it's on its way to social media. But more importantly than that, the HADF would like to market it for lease, build to suit, for sale, I don't know, whatever the city approves, really. And so, city can't do that, but the HADF should. So that's and then this is ultimately what happens anyway. HADF gets the land transferred to it, negotiated deals. So just stay ahead of anything that may be forthcoming.
Make a motion to approve lots 1 through 8, block 4 of Hartford City to HADF.
Second.
Okay, discussion? None. Anything else you need on that one, Karen, at all? No? Okay, we'll vote. Brennan?
Yes.
Keel?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
O'Hara?
Yes.
And Randall.
Yes.
Okay. All right, next topic on is discussion quality of life board or park board. Yes, so Teresa's got some information in the packet. Looking at reviving this discussion, a lot of this got shut down with COVID and everything like that. We were looking at it roughly a year ago. A couple different things out there. A lot of the paperwork that's out there talks about Parks Board or Parks Advisory Committee. Just got a couple different drafts out there, basically whether this would be drafted by ordinance or resolution. Is that part
You
of that,
can-
Teresa?
Yeah, so to set up a park board, there's two ways you can do it. You can do it through ordinance or you can set up a committee. Doing it through ordinance, basically, doing it through either one, basically, you can kind of set the rules or however you want to do it. You can put up the number of members you want on it. You can designate, how many times they meet. You can designate, what they kind of oversee and review. City has a control to set that up any way you want to do that. Basically, the only difference between a committee and an actual board is that you can pay committee members, but there is a state statute out there that says if it's set up by an ordinance, if a board is set up by an ordinance, they can't take any compensation. So that's really is the two basic differences. And when we talked about this a year ago, and I put, like I said, I drafted one for a committee and drafted one by ordinance. Basically, they were drafted the same, just proposing, 7 members, how often they'd meet or whatnot, but we can change any of that. We can delegate any of that, however we want to set it up, we can. So we can set up by ordinance. They'd be non-paid people that would be part of it, or we can set it up as just a committee and we can designate to pay them if we want to. So really, we have a lot of leeway of how we'd want to do that, yeah.
And, just kind of diving back to the original premise of some of this, a lot of the time that we focus is based around capital improvements and infrastructure and and even economic development and some of those kind of things, but we don't necessarily have an advisory committee or a board that really helps to make next decisions on quality of life issues. And when we look at all of the growth that we're looking at coming up in the next few years and the next 10 years, Amazon coming to town, or coming, as Keel would say, in East Hartford right over there, it's quality of life issues are going to be some of the bigger things. And the original premise with this is to set up a board that can help give basically us direction on what to tackle next, how much to spend, where to go with some of those kind of things. And I think there'd be plenty of people interested in serving on that board, whether it's paid or unpaid. I would like to keep it open to discussion that it may or may not be people that live within the city limits of Hartford, whichever we decide. I don't know that we'd want to necessarily strap ourselves right to that for this advisory board.
Yeah, we've got a history of some folks living just outside of the city limits that have been very involved and engaged in some of our boards, and so the ordinance to me is more attractive, as those are unpaid positions. And I think those people historically have done it because they're passionate about, the concept, so.
And some of the other thoughts with Envision 2025, possibly having some money that they could allocate toward those types of projects. This might be a good time to have somebody, maybe not us, out there looking at some other ideas.
Yes, exactly.
So,
I think that was some of the talk a year ago, was have this board to kind of vet those ideals,
Yes.
and people would come to this board, and that park board would vet those ideals, thoroughly look at them before something is brought to the city council to yay or nay on it, So the council wasn't doing that work, I mean, this board is doing that research, as I recall.
so is our ordinance, Teresa, in your opinion, are we ready to go? If we say, let's approve this, do we need to change some of the wording, if we're gonna call it more of a quality of life / park board, or do we need to?
Yeah, like I said, this was a draft that, I didn't put an ordinance number to it. It's just kind of a draft for discussion that we had a year ago, so we're not to first reading yet, but if
Right.
it's something
Yeah.
you like how it's drafted, we can certainly put it on the next agenda to do a first reading of it. Basically, it's set up with 7 board members, 5 are from the public that vote, 1 non-voting member from the council, 1 non-voting from the city staff. There's 3-year terms. Of course, they have officers, a chairman, vice, and a secretary. That council person that would sit on this board would be kind of liaison between the council and this board. The ordinance sets it up as meetings are held once a month right now. You need to have a quorum of 3 to vote on anything, and if there's vacancies, it's done by appointment. So that's kind of the premise of how both of them are set up.
My question, do we have a Parks, Sports and Rec Committee and a Biking and Rec Committee? Are we combining some of that? Because we already have 2 committees that are pretty much offshoots of this already anyway, I guess. What's the talk of that, I guess, if we're doing another overseeing committee for what those 2 are already doing, I guess?
Right. Yeah, it would be. So this would be a little more of a formal type quality of life, that would take some of those things from that big funnel and bring it up and help vet some of those decisions. So Bike and Rec or the Bike Trail Committee, a lot of that, even when we originally looked at this and talked a little bit with Troy Larson about that, he felt like, there's not quite enough for that committee to do, they'd probably just dissolve and become part of this.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, there's not 3 committees for that, seems a lot like
Yeah.
Riverside and Hartford.
Yep.
But if we're going to combine those and to get one that meets pretty regularly and is more involved, that makes more sense to me. And I guess if don't want to step on the toes of the 2 committees that are already out there, I guess, but that's kind of what I was wondering, I guess, so.
Right, right.
And the pool committee dissolved about 3 years ago.
That's already dissolved, yeah, yep.
And sports and rec, I don't know, I guess that's another discussion, maybe, how we deal with the different associations, the softball and
Yeah.
how far do we stretch this deal?
Their attendance is typically really
Yeah,
slim.
yeah.
Like,
They don't show up here very often when they have something on the
right,
agenda, so.
right. And just
I mean, it would be-
North Ledger didn't have a meeting, it's
Yeah.
4, maybe 5 people generally.
It wouldn't be bad to have somebody from that group, if we can find the right person, be involved with
Sure.
this. So,
Yep, yeah, just a question.
yeah, no,
Yes,
that's a great question. Funny part though, the first names that have been kicked around, most of them live outside of town, which is kind of funny. So,
Does the ordinance, I should take a quick closer look. Does it specify, meetings, sorry, right there it is. Shall meet once a month if there's business to conduct, okay. Gotcha. So I think, general direction I would say is probably if we come back with the ordinance version. I think it's a little more inclusive to have it say establishing a quality of life board. Maybe if it has to get a little more like, which could include parks and rec, parks and rec, bike trails,
yeah,
other quality of life issues,
Right.
maybe just a clarification language in there that just, so people when they read it, they know what that means. But it doesn't have to be limited to that. Quality of life issues could change over time. I think coming back with a first reading to look at something like that would probably cover it. You're looking at a 5-person group along with 7 or with 2 non-voting members. One would be a city council rep and another would be a city staff rep. I don't know, another discussion on that.
I think that's a great first step. I think if we get that, fine tune that a little bit, Teresa, so we can look at a first reading, I think that'd be good.
Do you want me to reach out to like the bike and rec and the sports complex committee to let them know it's gonna be an agenda for next, so they can kind of take a
Yeah,
look at it and
that'd
not be
probably
part of
be
the
a great
discussion
idea.
if they
Yeah.
choose and.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they could certainly take it the wrong way. Like, I remember Troy's comments, so he seemed very open
yeah,
Yeah.
to just
yeah.
becoming part of this group.
Yeah.
HADF is maybe a little more passionate, but I believe it's the best thing for the community.
Yeah.
Sort of isn't meant to weaken their position or their goals.
Okay.
All right.
I can do it.
All right. With that, don't believe we have any other correspondence. Looking for a motion to go into executive session for personnel
So legal to that?
and legal. Yep, we sure can.
Second.
All right.
Yes.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
For those of you know Cecil Baker, she's not doing very well. I don't think she'll make it through next couple of days. She's been back
She COVID or just?
just, I think just body's getting old and shutting down. It sounded like last week what I kind of heard is that they took her off some of her life dependent stuff, and just letting her kind of go in peace now. So it sounds like, I talked to Susie today at Peters, and she stopped doing COVID for maybe a day or two, so.
I'd like to make a motion that we have the following COLA and merit raises per person. Paul Clark at 69 cents, Brian Voth at 49 cents, Craig Wagner at $1.58, Karen Wilbur at $1.43, Rhonda at $1, Neil at $1.15, Jesse O'Kane at $1.03, Terry Hagan at 88 cents, plus a $1 per hour market increase. Alan Brown at 91 cents, Teresa Seidel at $1.57.
So for clarification on Terry Hagan, so basically $1.88? Okay.
Yep.
Marketing, okay.
But we wanted to keep, didn't we want to keep that separate, right? So it's 88 plus, yeah.
And that's all we're
Yeah.
in there, but just so we
For
can
your
make sure we're giving them the right amount,
Market
yeah.
adjustment, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right,
Second.
second.
Okay.
All right, any further discussion? We'll vote. Randall?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Brendan?
Yes.
Keel?
Yes.
O'Hara? Yes. All right. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
You need all this information back?
Yep.